It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
I go back to that era where the top marginal rate was 92%. Now, we know nobody paid that because they had a bunch of loopholes and they had a bunch of ways to get out of paying, but they still paid in the 60s.
That's right. The effective tax rate was closer to 60%. And now we're down to a situation where the effective tax rate apparently for the top 1% is like 21% heading downward. And same with corporations. Corporations were paying, 20% effective tax rate, now down to 17, or actually even lower than that. So, you hear about the advertised statutory tax rate, but in fact, the real percentage that people pay is much lower. And the richer you are, the lower the percentage at this point.
So let's talk about the plans that are out there, because there are some, originally we were going to raise income taxes on the wealthy. Biden wanted it to jump up to almost where it was before Trump and the Republicans lowered it down. Manchin was like, no, we're not going to go that high. And then Kirsten Sinema saying, no, we can't do any of that. And this is where this asset tax comes up. How do you see this playing out? And I guess maybe explain a little bit the difference between the two plans.
Yeah, the House put forward a plan. There's a revenue plan coming out of the House that it's not everything we want, but it has some progressive revenue components. But then, they ran into the buzzsaw in the Senate to get 50 votes just within the Democratic caucus. They're negotiating with each other. And you have, Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema saying, particularly Kirsten Sinema saying, I don't want the corporate income tax rate to go any higher. I don't want the effective individual tax rate to go any higher. And basically saying she's going to block that. And so there's a lot of creative brainstorming going on. And Senator Ron Wyden has said, well, what about this billionaire tax? This idea of taxing unrealized gains among the billionaire class. And apparently Sinema and Manchin are open to this. So right now, we're going to learn a lot in the next 48 hours, kind of about what the ultimate plan, how it's going to shake out, both on the spending side, what's going to be included in the $2 trillion, or hopefully not less, spending package, the Build Back Better plan.
Right.
But we're also going to figure out here how they, what consensus they're hopefully reaching around how to pay for it. And I think we'll see a billionaire income tax. We'll also see something called what I call a Millionaire Surcharge, which is income over $5 million is going to have a surtax, a 3% surtax. I think they could dial it up to 5% or even 10%. That's going to apply to both income from wages, but also income from assets. And the whole point here is, we shouldn't overtax work and undertax income from wealth. We should treat them the same, or even tax high income from wealth at higher rates.
No, I'm right there with you. So how does this asset tax work? I mean, is there anywhere that does this already? Is there an example of how this works in other places?
I don't believe so. There are, remember Senator Warren and Senator Sanders talked about a wealth tax. That would have been a tax on net worth. So you got $5 billion, you're paying a percentage of that total wealth. What the billionaire income tax is looking at is the gain, the unrealized untaxed gain. So let's say your asset, Elon Musk is an unusual example, but let's say your assets doubled over the last 2 years. So we would apply this tax, say 20% of the gain, not on the total asset amount, but on the increase in the gain, and primarily looking at publicly traded assets. So let's say my stock in Berkshire Hathaway went up $1 billion. I would pay 20% of that, and then it would be on an annual basis. You would tax that unrealized gain. So it's not like you're selling your asset, but you are paying a tax on the gain. And that's the idea. There's another phrase for it called mark to market. That's wonky, but it's basically saying we're gonna look at the value change every year and subject a portion of that to a tax.
Now,
just billionaires, just
billionaires,
focusing on that 700 plus super ultra wealthy.
Now, Business Week just came out with a story about Phil Knight, the guy the founder of Nike, and a wealthy guy, and they pointed out that in their report that he's already transferred about $10 billion in wealth, free of estate tax and gift tax. Already done that, avoiding about $3.6 billion in taxes. And they say he could avoid paying tax up to an additional $9 billion if he were to die today. I'm going. This is one of the wealthiest people in this country, who is figuring out how to get around paying taxes in the event that something happens to him. I'm struggling with that, especially when you're talking about, no, we can't get Granny hearing aids, and no, we can't get her dental work, and no, we can't get lower prescription drug prices, and no, we can't get, that poor kid growing up in the projects like I did, an opportunity to go to a community college. It just seems to me that that one should be more important than the other.
Yeah, and I think that the Phil Knight example is a great case study of how the super wealthy kind of play these shell games, and how a wealth tax or a billionaire income tax could treat that wealth when it goes into one of these trusts, tax it as if it's owned by Phil Knight, which it is, and if we fail to do that, we're going to be back into this austerity. There's not enough money, just as you're saying, Rick. There's not enough money to do the things we all know the investments we need to make, whether it's infrastructure or just helping people have sort of the decent conditions for a good life. We're going to constantly hear the Elon Musks of the world saying, don't tax me, and we can't afford these things. And when in fact, we are such a wealthy society, but huge amounts of wealth are being kind of sequestered in the shadows. And that's what we should be focusing on taxing.
No, I'm right there with you. But here again, we've been trained as a society to anytime we hear tax, we foam at the mouth like a Pavlovian dog. And I think the one thing that Biden has done somewhat effective is saying, no, look, the line for him was $400,000 for an individual, $450,000 for a couple. I think that could be a little bit higher. I wouldn't be against it. But at some point, you got to go, look, there's an obscene amount of wealth being held by a handful, and we're not able to get things for people who are struggling just to keep food on the table for their children. There's a disconnect here, and we got to figure out how to deal with it. And I think taxing them is the way forward.
Yeah, and there's a real possibility that coming out of this process, we'll see taxes go up on people, say, with incomes between $400,000 and $2 million. But this vast trillions of dollars of wealth controlled by billionaires will not be subject to any increased taxes. And that would be a failure. Yeah, we want to see, incomes, over $1 million or $2 million pay a little bit more. They've gotten huge tax breaks over the last couple decades. But we should really be looking at the giant wealth and asset concentrations and figure out how to tax those. And if we fail to do that, then we're gonna not just fail to capture revenue, but we're gonna see these oligarchs of wealth grow and their power continue to grow. Yeah. And that's not going to be good.
And we're not even talking about, the Pandora Papers and all of the money that are stashed in tax havens around the world, or here in South Dakota, here in the U.S. and South Dakota. We're not even talking about those things yet at all.
Yeah, and I think that, we have to kind of work in parallel on that. We have to shut down some of these trusts, like the ones that Phil Knight used. ProPublica exposed, of the 100 richest people in the United States, half of them are using these GRATs, these grant or retained annuity trusts. You can have our tax attorney friend Bob Lord explain those to you, because I'll put you to sleep, and I'll put myself to sleep. So, but these are really purposely complicated things. But Congress could shut them down. Lawmakers could say, a trust with $1 billion in it has to be disclosed, it has to be registered, and it's taxed. And then, the offshore tax havens and the onshore tax havens like Delaware and South Dakota, we should override that with federal laws requiring disclosure. Who owns these assets? and whose responsibility are they in terms of paying taxes. So this is totally fixable. But yeah, we can both raise the tax system, but we have to shut down this hidden wealth system that's bleeding the treasury.
So last question I've got for you, because, we've identified a problem, and I think we agree, there's a way forward. The question then becomes, is it possible? Will the Democrats figure out how to do this through this budget reconciliation plan? Because we know no Republicans coming on board on this. Do you see anything coming out of this?
I do. I think, it won't be everything that we hope, but I think we'll see something like a $2 trillion investment package come through that will be paid by wealthy people with incomes over 400,000, hopefully with some progressive tax revenue raisers that ensure billionaires pay their fair share. I mean, these are really popular proposals, and the revenue, taxing the wealthy right now, is extremely popular. So it's really a matter, will the politicians get out and where people are at, where the broader public is at, and follow the lead of most ordinary people who say, for the love of God, let's tax these folks who've been playing so many games with their taxes.
No, you're absolutely spot on, and because they are popular. When I talk to even Republicans, and I say, in favor of kids getting an additional 2 years of community college or vote tech, even though that's been ripped out of it, overwhelmingly they say yes. Getting Granny some chompers and hearing aids, yes, overwhelmingly. So it's just a matter of getting this pushed through. But Chuck, I appreciate the time you've taken for us to share your thoughts and expertise on this. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me, as always.
And the union gives a voice to win on the Rick Smith Show.